Welcome to a new time. Welcome to a new era.
This ain't WCW. This ain't Monday Night Raw. This ain't SmackDown. This ain't even WWE.
Feel the wrath of the pythons. You shall feel the wrath of Hulkamania. This is where the power lies.
And that's the bottom line because Stone Cold said so.
He put hard times on Dusty Rhodes and his family.
I got a 66 and 2/3 chance of winning because Kurt Angle knows he can't beat me and he's not even going to try.
It's time to step into the squared circle and get it done.
Welcome everyone to the Legends and Champions podcast for this week. Andy Evans here, coming to you as always from the United Kingdom. Hope everyone is doing well. Last week was the first of the 2 solo shows. I can now officially confirm that this will be the last one. All right. So last week we did TNA Unbreakable 2005. This week I'm going to be breaking down and talking more about Jimmy Hart's promotion, which was called the XWF. This is going to be part of a 2-week series on, well, I suppose you could call them disasters in wrestling, if you will, because next week Stefan will be back. The episode is taped, it's ready, it's done, and we will be doing the Heroes of Wrestling pay-per-view. It's one that yeah, you gotta wait to hear this one. We are going to go into the Heroes of Wrestling next week. This week it's the XWF, and then we're going to be looking at TNA. No, we're not. We're going to be looking at NXT Takeover, the first one that happened. That's all coming up over the next couple of weeks right here on Legends and Champions. Now, if you want to be a part of the community that we have at Celebrate Wrestling, you can do. It's very, very easy to do. How do you do it, I hear you ask? Well, the answer is quite simple. I said to Self, that's an old comrade joke. I said, Self, how do I get involved in Celebrate Wrestling? And it was very easy, the answer. Go to Facebook. Search for Celebrate Wrestling. Click like, answer a few questions because that's what Meta tells us we have to do, and Mike will let you in. It's a no-jerk zone. It's a jerk-free zone. Not a lot of wrestling communities have that. We have it. Jerk-free. Everybody in there are cool dudes. You could be part of the Greek World Order. You could be part of the LAC Army. That doesn't work. I need something for the Legends. Yeah, I've got the Greek World Order. I need something for the... You could be part of the LAC Wolfpack. I don't know. We're still working on it. You could be part of that. You could be part of Maguire on Wrestling. It doesn't matter what show or shows you support. You can just be a part of the conversation. And all of us are there, whether or not that's me, Mike, Stefan, Mitch, Dimitri, Joe. All of us are active, and so are you. Plus, some of your comments can be used in the shows, such as when Mike does the Yay Boo segment on Maguire on Wrestling. So, coming up this week on Celebrate, Saturday, Mitch and Dimitri are back with the alternate commentary table. I am proudly repping a Greek World Order shirt, courtesy of Celebrate Wrestling, and you can still buy yours. There's no postal strike in Canada. Get it while you can, because you also get stickers. Sorry, Dimitri. Inside joke. You can also get the Celebrate Wrestling t-shirt, because when you watch the Celebrate Wrestling t-shirt, you can then listen to Maguire on Wrestling, which is on a Sunday. There isn't one for Legends. Just saying. No Legends shirt yet. Just let that sit in. No Legends shirt. What would you have on a Legends shirt anyway? Whack-a-bush? Oh, that's giving something away for next week. But we'll find out. All right, we're going to go to the rest of the show. We will be back next week with more of Legends and Champions. Don't forget, you can be part of the conversation, like I've said, on Celebrate. Subscribe on the podcast feed. Let your voices be heard. Listen, tell us what you think. We will be back after this quick intermission. Sounds like a 90s cinema, doesn't it? We'll be back after this with the XWF in a minute. Bye-bye now.
The alternate commentary table, ACT, brought to you by the Celebrate Wrestling podcast feed. Listen, it's Mitch, it's Dimitri. We got this little pod thing that we do every single week where we talk about the week in wrestling and the way in which we do it from the other side of the railing. Right, Mitch?
I like that.
We're coming at it because we love it. We hate it. The alternate commentary table.
ACT.
XWFT. Download it anywhere where you're getting your podcasts.
Sure.
The Road Warriors and the XWF. What a run!
Welcome back, everyone, to Legends and Champions, the podcast that digs into the fascinating yet sometimes forgotten corners of professional wrestling history. You all know me. My name's Andy Evans. I'm coming to you from the United Kingdom, and today we're going to be looking at a promotion that emerged in a truly unique and challenging time. The wrestling promotion that really has no name. It's the X Wrestling Federation, or XWF for short. So let's go back in time. The year is 2001, and the world of professional wrestling has been rocked to its very foundations, its very core. WCW World Championship Wrestling, ECW Extreme Championship Wrestling were both gone, done and dusted, corrupt, kaput, finito, gone into the world, never to be seen again, not coming back, unless it was the invasion angle, and we forget about that. So when the dust was settled, what was left? I'll answer that for you. One single dominant entity, the World Wrestling Federation, the worldwide leader in sports entertainment. Soon to be the WWE, this wasn't just a shift. It was a near monopoly, leaving what was a massive void for an alternative product and countless talented wrestlers and performers and managers and valets and commentators without a major platform. But it was also this landscape that the XWF dared to step into. It was born from discussions initiated by the investor known as Kevin Harrington. Now, for those of you in the States, he's known for his Shark Tank appearances. For us in the UK, Shark Tank is kind of like their version of Dragon's Den. You know, so you've got the experts around with the money, they're going to invest, you're going to put a pitch in, blah, 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 blah. And you know, we got Levi Roots. Yeah. There we go. The XWF, though, had an ambitious vision. They wanted to directly challenge the World Wrestling Federation by offering something different. Family-friendly entertainment. A PG style of wrestling. This was a direct counter to what Vince and the World Wrestling Federation were doing with the Attitude Era and the chaotic final years of what WCW was all about. The XWF tried to blend the nostalgia of past legends with the dynamic, I cannot speak, this wouldn't be my show if I couldn't speak, the dynamism of future superstars. And really what they did was they were drawing inspiration from the WCW Saturday night and main event shows that aired on TBS at 6:05 p.m. Eastern time. They did realize, though, that in order to kind of really get things going, they needed to kick it off with some star power. So they brought in some big names for both management and on-screen roles. The Mouth of the South, Jimmy Hart, was named the president. Brian Knobbs of the Nasty Boys and Greg the Hammer Valentine were other key owners. Raina Merrill, better known as Sable from the World Wrestling Federation, was introduced as CEO, and the legendary Hot Rod Rowdy Roddy Piper became the commissioner. This was a clear business strategy. Leverage the existing fame to build instant recognition and trust. So, with the basis in place, let's talk now about the creative vision. Let's talk about how it played out, because the XWF publicly declared it would be an even playing field with no politics and a definitive end to prima donnas. It was a thinly veiled jab at WCW, well-documented backstage issues. But the irony was almost immediate. Brian Knobbs, known for his chaotic Nasty Boys antics, as we said, was part owner. And then there was the immortal Hulk Hogan, arguably the quintessential prima donna of professional wrestling, who was heavily featured. The presence of other controversial figures like Buff Bagwell and Vampiro also challenged the no prima donnas claim. The gap between their idealistic pronouncements and the reality of the roster created immediately a credibility problem. And the creative presentation, often featuring Jimmy Hart and Brian Knobbs as on-screen hosts, aimed for the fast-paced, family-friendly PG style. But when you look at the lost episodes, the package they released for the first 3, a major weakness becomes apparent. A lack of storylines, a lack of development, a lack of compelling character backstories, especially for new viewers. The matches that they put on those shows were often quick squashes, and they lacked the intricate storytelling and the sustained high quality of in-ring action that would later define the TNA X division, which is what we spoke about last week when we did Unbreakable. But what was potentially more confusing and weird, basically, in terms of creative, was the decision to introduce early on in the show multiple authority figures, Sable as the CEO and Commissioner Piper, and also to introduce announcers before any wrestlers or storylines were properly established. So if you look at this in management structures, what it does is it suggests that there was a top-heavy management-focused approach rather than talent-driven narrative. And this creative approach suffered from one of the biggest fundamental flaws: prioritizing rapid-fire action and familiar faces over substantive character development and that long-term storytelling. So without compelling storytelling, it's incredibly difficult to sustain viewer interest or even to attract potential TV partners. Just look at TNA. Look at what AEW, they're struggling. They have been struggling. TNA struggled. ROH struggled. A lot of the promotions, all promotions will struggle if there's not compelling stories. After the break, we're going to be talking about the roster of the XWF. We'll see you after this.
A lot of hard work and determination went into making the XWF. And our storylines we tried to give the very best to the fans, what they wanted to see. And we had some new stars like Hale and Ian Harrison.
Well, you know what you're talking about? Hard work? You gotta be kidding me. I was there in the office from 8 o'clock in the morning to 10 o'clock at night, and what time did you and Greg come wandering in?
Hey, well, we had to take some breaks in and out of there, Jimmy. You know that. I mean, my legs were hurting, my knees, you know how it is, all these years of wrestling.
Well, your legs were hurting from carrying sags all these many years. That's what it was really all about.
Hey, what about our hot CEO and Roddy Piper? That made for some interesting television.
Welcome back to Legends. This week, talking all about the XWF, the X Wrestling Federation. I never understood why they called it that name. I mean, give it something. Call it like the Extreme Wrestling Federation, or call it, I don't know, Excitement, or I don't know, anything, but give it a name. I mean, that just didn't, oh no, give it a name. I mean, I like the logo. The logo looked like dog bones. That was cool. But again, wait, I don't know. Yeah, don't know. All right, the XWF roster was, at the time, one of the most fascinating snapshots of the wrestling world at that point. It was a blend of those most notable wrestling legends that were anything from not being a prima donna and established stars, along with quite a contingent of promising younger talent who would achieve success elsewhere later on in their careers. You had, as we've already mentioned, the iconic names such as the immortal Hulk Hogan, Mr. Perfect Kurt Hennig, Jerry the King Lawler, and the Hot Rod, Rowdy Roddy Piper. You had the owners and the managers like Jimmy Hart, Brian Knobbs, Greg Valentine. You had Jannetty, Buff Bagwell, Vampiro, The Road Warriors made an appearance. The Funker himself, Terry Funk, Norman Smiley, and Johnny B. Bad, because he was a bad man, made an appearance. These were the names that were meant to provide that immediate recognition and nostalgic appeal, taking you back to WCW or taking you back to the World Wrestling Federation. But crucially, what they also did was showcase talents who would become integral to the success and the critical acclaim of TNA, which would debut about 12 months later. And we're talking about future legends. The Phenomenal One, AJ Styles, the Fallen Angel, Christopher Daniels, and Kid Cash, an ECW alumni. It also gave Josh Matthews an opportunity to step foot into the squared circle, and I really wish it hadn't done that. Hey, he was great on Tough Enough, but no, not a really good worker, was he? Great behind the mic. I love Josh Matthews behind the mic. I thought he had a really unique sound, a really unique presence, but as an in-ring performer, yeah, no, didn't. No. But similar to what we're going to talk about on next week's show, the presence of having both aging legends and future top-tier talent really did create this unique but short-lived dynamic. The legends were meant to draw the younger talent, offered a glimpse into the future of professional wrestling, a future that the XWF itself ultimately failed to capitalize on. Because despite having incredible talents like AJ, like Daniels, who would later prove themselves to be industry innovators and main event performers, the XWF's creative direction prioritized those older, more recognizable names. It effectively created, without wanting to, a glass ceiling for the younger, high-flying and the more athletic talents, as they were largely thrown into a sort of a lackluster style cruiserweight division. The matches that they had, whilst being energetic and showcasing this undeniable potential, were often criticized as being quick, being squashes, and being tamer than the groundbreaking X division that would define TNA just a year later. And this limited their ability to truly shine and connect with the audience as what they were, future main eventers. It hindered the character development. It hindered their overall impact. And this underutilization of its most dynamic, future-oriented talent really does, in my mind, and I think in a lot of critics and fans, stands as one of the most crucial creative missteps. So, the XWF was the brainchild of the Shark Tank man. The XWF was focusing on no prima donnas. The XWF had Tony Schiavone and the King Jerry Lawler on commentary. The XWF had Gene Oakland. The XWF had the Brain, Bobby Heenan. But what the XWF didn't have was a TV presence. It didn't have a deal. It wasn't airing anywhere. They did, however, have 10 episodes recorded. And even though they were recorded a bit like Global Force, they were compiled and released on a 3-disc set. Interestingly titled Hulk Hogan in Your Face, the lost episodes of the XWF. Now, it would later get renamed to become XWF, the lost episodes. But again, this whole no prima donnas thing in having Hulk Hogan on the title of the DVD pack. Now, that was an advertising thing. That was done because they wanted to try and capitalize on the name of Hulk Hogan. I get it. You know, you see it out there in a shop. What are you going to do? It's going to have Hogan's name on it. You're going to purchase it. It makes sense, but it goes against what they say within the first 60 seconds of the first show it's all about. So the 3-disc DVD set that was released consisted of 10 45-minute episodes. And that became the main public record of the promotion's brief existence. They did do a countdown to the XWF, which was Gene Okerlund in the ring, kind of promoting it and talking about what it was. But again, it was paid advertisement. It didn't do anything. The DVD set featured 19 matches and some bonus features, and the content showcased a mix of stars. The immortal Hulk Hogan went up against Mr. Perfect, a 1990 World Wrestling Federation Superstars rematch. Marty Jannetty went up against Hale. The Nasty Boys went up against the Shane Twins. Kurt Hennig went up against Vampiro. Kurt Hennig, Mr. Perfect. The cops can't use him that. There was a Cruiserweight Championship match between the phenomenal AJ Styles and Kid Cash. There were tag team matches with Juventud Guerrera and Psychosis facing off against Conan and Ray Gonzalez. There was even a singles match between Simon Diamond and the King Jerry Lawler. But the sheer volume of matches, which were often described as quick and lacking this deep narrative, what it does is it suggests a production model focused on quantity over quality. And this was likely influenced by the talent contracts that would have been issued, these brief signing, brief natured contracts. But the biggest question was, how did the fans and the critics react? And the answer to that was, well, they were mixed. Opinions were largely confused, confuddled. They were often clustering within the mediocre ranges on sites such as cagematch.net. But there were some positive aspects noted, like the production quality was decent. It looked good. It looked professional. It looked like it could have come from Stanford. Reviewers found the lost episodes, and I remember when I reviewed it back in the day when it first came out and I got it on another show, as being fun to watch and to look back on. And what's become more prevalent with this is that as years have gone by and as history has changed and we've seen promotions come and promotions go, without meaning to be so, the XWF has become an interesting precursor to what TNA was going to become. The similarities and the comparisons between TNA and the XWF are there. This focus on being an alternative, this focus on promoting younger stars and not having prima donnas, which obviously we worked out was rubbish. This ability to do high-flying, fast-paced, fast-action matches is exactly what the TNA ethos was when it first debuted. And to this day, what it still is with the X Division. But continuing with the critics and the feedback, many criticisms were pervasive. Many felt the company was built just badly, didn't make any sense, felt it was clunky in its execution. The biggest complaint, though, was its failure to differentiate itself from WCW. And it was often dismissed as being a cheap WCW ripoff or even WCW 2.0. The creative decision to paint a glass ceiling for younger talent by confining them to those cruiserweight matches was also highlighted as a misuse of potential. Because even though the in-ring action, whilst it was energetic, it was often described as tame when you compare it like for the X Division. Fan sentiment carried a strong element of nostalgia with its featured stars, but the broader consensus among objective fans and historians was that it was a brief footnote and a time capsule. After the break, let's look at the finances of the XWF. We'll see you after this.
It has been a long time in coming, and the XWF has finally delivered. Folks, no more prima donnas. The greatest action you possibly can see.
All right, welcome back to Legends for this week, talking all about the XWF. So far, we've talked about the lost episodes. We've talked about the concept albeit not actually happening, of no prima donnas. We've talked about the use of younger talent and future legends. But now we're going to look into the finances. So we're going to dive into the financial realities and the operational challenges that ultimately killed and doomed the XWF. They did manage to secure some initial financial backing from Kevin Harrington, and that provided the necessary capital for the initial TV tapings and the setup. But the business model they had was overly ambitious. It was to become a nationally televised wrestling organization. They were aiming to fill the market void that had been left by WCW and ECW. But what most people fail to recognize is that to fill that void, it's more than just a one-step process. It's more than just obtaining funding. It's about having that long-term viability. Ultimately depends on one thing: a lucrative national or international television deal. And really, this is where the XWF faced its most devastating blow: its failure to secure said TV deal. Because even though they had 10 episodes taped and ready to go, they couldn't find a distribution agreement with any of the national networks. And Hart has gone on record and explained the frustrations that network executives would show the initial excitement over the roster names, especially the legends, but their interest would wane and lead to rejection once they learned that many of the big names advertised had already departed to the World Wrestling Federation. And we will talk about that in a second. Now, because of this, it made the XWS product appear inconsistent and also lacking in that all-powerful star power. It rendered it ultimately an unattractive investment for broadcasters, because without that national exposure, the XWF had no viable path to compete with that televised giant that was New York. The other major misstep, and one that you kind of see the logic to, but you also question the logic, it's like that 50-50 catch-22 situation, was potentially the biggest operational and strategic cock-up. And that was the decision to sign wrestlers to short-term 45-day deals that was set to expire at the beginning of 2002. Now, what happens at the beginning of the year in January? I'll let you just ponder that just for a second. It's the Royal Rumble. And which company leads and runs the Royal Rumble? The World Wrestling Federation. And this was their problem, because this short-sighted structure of contracts proved ultimately fatal, because its expiration coincided with the Royal Rumble, a period where the WWE traditionally looks to bolster its roster. And because many of the XWF key talents were therefore free to sign with the WWF, it left Jimmy's promotion with a severely depleted roster and unable to present that consistent star-studded product to potential network partners. As we said, this 45-day contract model was the biggest fundamental flaw that prevented the XWF from building a stable and growing entity. And this really does now lead us to this big elephant in the room, the WWE factor. Because as we said, and as we know, in 2001, the World Wrestling Federation held the monopoly. It created a hostile and challenging environment for any new competitor to try and break in. And let's be frank, right? No company then, now, or in the future will be able to compete with the WWE in backing, in market share, in revenue, and in distribution. All you can do now is be an alternative. All you can do now is build your own brand. You can't compete against the big boys anymore because the WWE is too big. And we're seeing that. It's too global. It's too expensive. It's too much about corporate greed now. Look at the ticket prices. Mitch and Dimitri spoke about it a few weeks ago on ACT. Mike and Joe have talked about it on MOW. It's ridiculous. They've got the budget. They've got the backing of TKO. They've got the ability to do massive dollar deals to keep talent locked in for 10 years if they want. You can't compete with them. But in 2001, people thought they did. Now, especially around this sort of time, if you look at this 2001, 2002 sort of era, the WWE weren't stable. What do I mean by that? Well, what I mean is this. They were experiencing their own financial pressures, but internally. Because in late 2001, early 2002, they had plummeting pay-per-view buy rates. They had gates that were increasingly lowered in numbers and revenue. And what this ultimately did was lead to budget cutbacks. A financially strained monopolist would be highly motivated to eliminate any potential competition, making the XWF's challenge even more formidable. Now, a critical and ultimately fatal blow to the dreams and the goals and the aspirations of the XWF was the strategic acquisition of several of its high-profile talents by Vince. And he did that shortly after the TV tapings. Now, the talent that he picked up were major draws like Hulkster, like Jerry the King Lawler, like Kurt Hennig, and like Rowdy Roddy Piper. The timing of these acquisitions was particularly damaging. Let's take Jerry Lawler, for example. Now, Jerry Lawler had left the WWF because of his relationship with the Cat, Stacey Carter. But he was offered his job back in the WWF the day before the tapings were scheduled to occur. Now, he honored his XWF commitment, but then promptly returned to the WWE. And I think if you listen back to the commentary, you could tell that Lawler was there because it was a date. You could tell he wasn't truly invested in it. Tony Schiavone was amazing, but, you know, Lawler wasn't really Lawler. He tried, but you knew something was coming up. But ultimately, and what was interesting about this was the XWF match that Hulk Hogan had against Kurt Hennig was even cited as a key event that paved the way for his eventual high-profile return to the World Wrestling Entertainment. And let's not, you know, walk around the bush here, right? Let's not curb around it. These talent acquisitions were not accidental. The evidence suggests that McMahon actively pursued a strategy of purging talent from the XWF with the explicit goal of screwing their chances of getting a deal. And this direct and calculated interference demonstrates what we know and what we've already seen before, this ruthless and effective effort by the WWE to stifle its potential competition right in its infancy. That whole bit where McMahon goes, I have WCW and the competition in my hands. Another example of that. But the rapid departure of those big names, as we've said, proved fatal to the prospect of securing a TV deal. The talent drain, exacerbated by the short-term contracts, really did create an unsustainable business model. They couldn't guarantee that consistent high-quality product. You couldn't create storylines because you didn't know who was going to be there from 1 minute to the next. You didn't know if you were going to have a talent. You couldn't introduce titles. You couldn't plan world champions or mid-card titles. You couldn't plan feuds. You couldn't plan a pay-per-view. You couldn't plan a live event because you didn't know who you had available to go. And the talent drain was not merely a loss of performers. It was the systematic failure of the XWF's business model and a direct consequence of the predatory tactics of the World Wrestling Entertainment. When we talk about major event changing incidents for the XWF, it's really important to understand that these weren't typical in-ring occurrences like injuries or match outcomes. For the XWF as a promotion, the most significant incident were external and systemic. Those talent acquisitions. The early departure of the Hulkster, who was a cornerstone of their advertising and a major draw, was a prime example of a devastating incident that derailed the promotion's plans and undermined its credibility. For a new coming out of the blocks wrestling promotion that was attempting to establish itself against the big boy, against the competitive dominant player, the loss of key talent, especially through active poaching, is as equivalent to a catastrophic in-ring injury for a top star. As we said, it derails plans. It undermines credibility. And instantly it leads to an immediate and irreversible failure. But it's also worth noting that when I was putting this together and I was putting the research on and you know, I didn't want to just look at the matches and kind of go, oh, this was terrible. I wanted to do this differently and look at the business side and look at what really led to the downfall of the XWF. And it's worth noting that in all of the available research, in all of the work I did, it doesn't indicate any major career altering in-ring injuries or significant event-specific incidents within their existence that would have impacted their trajectory. What this means is a knock-on effect is that the absence of this highlights that the failure of the promotion was predominantly business and strategy, rather than a consequence of unforeseen physical calamities of its product. Its overall downfall is rooted in fundamental operational and competitive challenges. When we come back, we're going to be looking at the legacy of the XWF. We'll see you after this.
You know, I've covered professional wrestling for well over 30 years. I've seen it all. Maybe you thought you had too. But I can assure you, you have never, ever seen anything like the XWF. The X, by the way, stands for exciting. And it is that and a whole lot more. I look forward to seeing you live at ringside. I'm Mean Gene Okerlund, and this has been the XWF Countdown.
Welcome back to Legends, talking all about the X Wrestling Federation, the XWF. We've been on a bit of a journey with this one. We've been looking at the finances. We've been looking at the WWE effect. Now we're going to be looking at the legacy. So what is the XWF's enduring legacy? Because despite its brief and ultimately failure of a run, it holds a unique and often overlooked place in professional wrestling. It stands as a brief footnote, occasionally an odd footnote, in the critical period directly following the collapse of WCW and ECW and preceding the sustained emergence of TNA. More than just a failed venture, though, the XWF serves as a compelling time capsule of the immediate post-Monday Night War era. It vividly showcases the roster of displaced talent available at that moment, and it represents an ambitious, albeit flawed, attempt to carve out a new niche in a monopolistic market. It was in many ways an interesting precursor to TNA, sharing a lot of similarities. The common venue at Universal Studios in Orlando, Florida. It features some of the core talent, such as AJ and Christopher Daniels. But the XWF's failure, when looked at retrospectively, provides crucial, albeit harsh lessons for a promotion that followed like TNA. It demonstrates the absolute necessity of long-term talent retention, and paramount importance is securing that robust, guaranteed national TV deal in the post-territory, post-Monday Night War landscapes. For me, though, I think the XWF's rapid and decisive demise kind of really underscores that brutal realities of competing against the dominant established entity. The WWE factor of aggressive talent poaching, combined with the vast resources and the market power, proved to be insurmountable. It was the David and Goliath situation, the irresistible force meeting the immovable object. Again, the promotion's reliance on this short-term 45-day contract was the biggest, fundamentally biggest strategic error. It left them open. It left them vulnerable to attack. It left them vulnerable to being scooped up and talent being moved away. It left them vulnerable to not being able to do that one basic thing that they should do. Build a consistent product. It highlights what we all know as wrestling fans. The importance of long-term investment, the importance of the retention in professional wrestling, of the talent, of the storylines, of getting the basics right. But above all else, the XWF story serves as the starkest of reminders of that paramount importance of securing that TV deal. Because any aspiring wrestling promotion in the modern era will not survive. It doesn't matter if you've got a roster that features the nostalgic legends and the promising young stars. If you cannot generate sufficient revenue, reach, or a sustained interest to compete on that national scale, you will not survive. All Elite have been on the same similar journey. In fact, when that TV deal was being renewed, the rights were being renewed, there was talk about them potentially not getting it. We know about the sale of WCW. Fusient Media, led by Eric Bischoff, were going to buy WCW with a TV deal. But when Turner pulled the broadcasting, when they pulled WCW off their schedules, the value of WCW went down. It was a tape library. The value of WCW was more important than the XWF because of that tape library. But without it, what was it? If you can't get your product out there and you can't see your product, what's the point? You can't rely on the dirt sheets. This time, podcasts like us weren't around. You needed eyes on the product. And what really surprises me about all of this is that when you look at who was running the company, the level of experience, even if they'd never promoted before, but the level of experience and who they've been around in their careers, why didn't they know that? It's fascinating to think, really, what would have happened if things had been different. Would we have had TNA? Would the XWF still be around? Would they have been shut down? If they'd got the fundamentals right, what would have happened? And why in the God's right did they not give it a proper name? Sorry, that really bugs me. The XWF is intriguing. The XWF is interesting. And again, I'm not breaking the matches down. I'm not going to give you the run times. You can find that out. This is different. That's it for this week. Thank you for joining us. Now, next week on the show, I am hoping that Stefan is back. And if he is back, we will be looking at the Heroes of Wrestling pay-per-view that took place in 1999. So hopefully Stefan will be back. But if he's not, we'll do something different. You're just going to have to wait and find out. That doesn't stop you, though, enjoying all of the shows on the Celebrate Network. So Celebrate Wrestling on all major podcast providers. Just search for that. You can listen to Mitch and Dimitri on a Saturday with the alternate commentary table. Mike on McGuire on Wrestling on a Sunday. And of course, we're here every week. All of us, Mitch, Dimitri, the amazing Joe Aguinaldo, Mike McGuire, we're all active on social media as well at Celebrate Wrestling on Facebook. All you need to do is search for that, answer a few questions, because I'm just going to get a soundbite for this. I say it every week. That's what Meta tells us we have to do. And Mike will let you in. You can then be a part of this community that's been built. It's an amazing community that's been built where you can converse with other wrestling fans, have a conversation, and let your voice be heard on the shows. So that's it. That's it for the XWF. That's it for me. I'm hoping that's the end of the solo shows. I hope you've enjoyed them. They have been different. 2 weeks, 2 different shows. Next week, hopefully, Heroes of Wrestling. And we're also going to be looking at NXT TakeOver in a few weeks as well. But for me, I will see you in some form next week. Until then, see you at the matches. So long. Bye-bye.
This has been Legends and Champions with Andy Evans. Thank you for listening.